cultural identities of queer men in Thai classical string music. His research interests include ethnomusicology, gender and queer theories, music and rituals, sound and embodiment, popular cultures, and world music pedagogy. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Nattapol Wisuttipat. Dr. Nattapol, thank you so much for being with us today. The floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I never had someone read my introduction this long, so I'm very, very excited and I'm flattered. Well, thank you so much for Dr. Claire Chan for inviting me here, and I'm always excited to give a guest lecture to our fellow ethnomusicologists in Southeast Asia, as I've always wanted to, somehow get a chance to connect with our fellow musicians and get to know fellow students, graduate students around Southeast Asia. It's a very, very good way to keep our network strong and sort of get to know what's going on elsewhere outside Thailand. So thank you so much once again for Professor Claire Chan for having me and for the department to for organizing this very, very wonderful series of lectures. And I'm very, very honored and excited to be the first speaker of this lecture. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay. Can I? Oops. Huh. Okay. Can you all see my screen now? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I am given 2 hours, and this class it will be done by 1 p.m. Malaysia time. Right now it is 10 a.m. in Thailand time.
Dr. Nat, we can maybe have like 10-15 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, sure. I sort of okay. Let's go through how I uh, plan this lecture real quick. Okay. So my topic today is gonna be about. Hold on. I jumped ahead. Okay, here. My talk today is gonna be about gender, sexuality, and queerness, and I would like to think about these three issues or these three topics through music and performing arts. Uh, of course, these topics have been very, very important and have been a very, very significant uh, part of the discussion among ethnomusicologists today. And we'll try to, through this talk, I'll sort of hopefully get you to start thinking how gender, sexuality, and queerness shaped and are shaped by musical performances. Here's a little bit information about me. I know that ZU has already done a very, very wonderful job of introducing myself, but here it is once again. My name is Nattapol Wisuttipat, or you could call me by my nickname, that is Pup, P-U-P, that is my nickname. Yes, I am an ethnomusicologist. I got my degree from the US. I am trained in the American ethnomusicology camp. My primary interest is on Thai classical music or the traditional music of central Thailand. And I particularly examine the gender and sexuality aspect in Thai classical music. In addition to that, I have recently started working on a vernacular or popular music performance in Thailand, and it is a genre called Rothair, which is basically a live music truck, where people modified a 10-wheeler or 18-wheeler truck and fit all the sound system and the musical performance and everything inside that truck, and they perform on that truck while it is in motion. And there are different variants of this live music trucks. Sometimes they are available in sort of a huge format, huge setting, as you can see here behind you in the photo on the top. Or sometimes it's available in a smaller form factor, like a push cart, and that sort of gives it even more accessibility. It can travel into smaller places where huge trucks like this cannot go. But anyway, that's a little bit about what I do and what my research interests are as of now. Currently, I teach at the Faculty of Sociology and Anthropology in Thammasat University. It is located in Bangkok, Thailand, and there is another campus located far up north in the suburb of Bangkok. And I travel both campuses to teach, which is a little bit tiring, but I'm happy to do it. Okay, now today's agenda is gonna be, I'm gonna cover 3 parts. I'm gonna unpack the idea about sex, gender, and sexuality, and then I'll be sort of transition you towards the assigned reading that I gave you before the class. That is Tamara Lu's article titled "Reading Butler's Gender Trouble in Southeast Asia," and I will introduce you to the key concept of course, Judith Butler's performativity and her idea about troubling gender before situating it into the region of Southeast Asia. Because as you know, as for those who have already read Tamara Lu's article, Butler's performativity is very widely cited, and it's unquestionably helpful in all social sciences and humanities academic world. But sometimes when applying performativity or even gender trouble in general in a place where there is a different cultural and social context, some modification and some cautions needs to be placed before we apply them. We cannot transport them wholesale without modifying anything, because that would make a that would create a lot of problem, because we are not considering the context that sort of drives the idea of gender trouble, and the local context in Southeast Asia that could mean totally different things about how people in Southeast Asia think about sex, gender, or even sexuality. And then in the third part, I'll be moving from thinking about gender in general towards gender and music, and in particular, ethnomusicology. I'll sort of walk you through the ideas of shifting ideas about how ethnomusicology comes to think about women, and later on gender, and later on gender relations, and how the ideas of power and gender works in with respect to music and musical performances. Both ways, how gender shapes music and how music shapes the idea of gender. These are 3 points that I would like to go through today in our lecture. And as Professor Claire has already mentioned, there will be a question and answer, a time for question and answer after this lecture. But could we do this, Professor Claire? Could we sort of like move back and forth between lecture and discussion during these 2 hours, so that way we have more sort of like a continuous interaction? Would that be
Yes,
possible?
sure, up to you.
Okay, so for those of you who are present in the classroom, I'm gonna give you a heads up right now that be prepared, because I'll be opening the floor and I'll be asking questions from you, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what you have to say and what your thoughts on on the readings that I have assigned to you. Okay, so be ready for that. There'll be parts that I'll be asking question midway or on the in the middle of my lecture. Okay, and I hope that you can uh, participate with us. And I'm sure Professor Claire has already shared my points, or some things to consider while reading the articles, both of the articles. So I hope you have come prepared with all the points that you have in mind and that we can get the conversation started right away when called for. Okay. First of all, sex, gender, sexuality. These are the three common terms that we always come across in some way or another when we are reading text about music, or sometimes when we are taking courses in intro to anthropology or intro to even gender studies. We have to deal with these three concepts all the time. But you know what? As much as we have seen this, as much as we have discussed, as much as we have read these topics over the literature, either from anthropology or ethnomusicology, there are still confusions that are around the students who are reading text about this. So I would like to get this straight before we continue to other topics about the difference or the distinctions between sex, gender, and sexuality. Okay, that's the first thing I'd like to do in this lecture to make sure that we are on the same page, that we have a clear-cut definition, at least a working definition of what sex, gender, and sexuality refers to, and what are the differences between them, across them. First of all, when we talk about sex, I know, sex, sometimes people think about, oh, the activity that people do at night, or, the private activity that people engage with. Yes, that's one thing, but in terms of human difference, sex is quite a different conversation. So when we talk about sex, you remember when you apply for a passport and when you are traveling overseas or to another country, you have to fill out an immigration form. And in that immigration form, you have to insert your personal information. And one of the personal information that you have to insert or you have to disclose is your sex, right? You have to disclose or identify whether you're male or female. So my question is, what is the basis on which sex is determined amongst human beings? Well, simply put, sex is basically determined by your genitalia. And by genitalia, I mean your private parts. And that private part is determined right from when you were born. Basically, it is the reproductive organ you were born with. From the first day you open your eyes to the earth. For example, if you have a penis, you will be determined or you be identified as male. Or if you have a vagina, you will be identified as female. As simple as that. That is the way we differentiate human difference based on their biological traits. And by biological traits, we refer to the reproductive organ. So in terms of sex, there'll be two categories, male and female. But there are some exceptions. For example, intersex, that is people who were born with two reproductive organs. And that is sort of like a very, very complicated medical condition. And those people who were born with both reproductive organs will have to undergo quite a lot of medical treatment to make sure that when they grow up, they will develop like one reproductive organ as their main sort of like an organ that drives their hormones and their growth. So this is one of the exceptions for complicated identities related to sex. But generally speaking, when we talk about sex, it usually refers to the biologically determined. That is, your reproductive organ, whether you're male or female. Next is gender. When we know that sex is determined biologically, gender is something that is determined socially. In other words, gender is a social construct. It is basically what a society thinks someone or a person should behave based on their sex. So don't be confused when we talk about gender, because gender could change from culture to culture. One culture may have a different set of gender values, that is how a male should behave in that society, how a female should behave in that society. For example, in the West, this is a very, very overgeneralizing statement, okay? In the West, if we watch a Hollywood movie, some of the concept of or the perception of what it means to be male is someone who is very muscular, someone who is very strong, someone who is very adventurous. Think about, all these Marvel superhero movies, Captain America, think of the Hulk and all these kind of characters. These are all representation of what it means to be male, strong, muscular, and buffed up, and all those kind of stuff. That is how the West, or at least the American culture, thinks of what ideal masculine or ideal manhood is. But if we look back into our Asian culture, the ideas about what it means to be a man is quite different. Think about Netflix series Vincenzo. I don't know if you have watched this series already. The one portrayed by led by Song Joong-ki, the Korean actor. Or you could also think about any other Korean dramas or K dramas or K series. You see that the portrayal of the lead male character is quite different from the Marvel superheroes movies, in a sense that all these male characters are more toned down in terms of their body. They have much fairer skin complexion. They have a very, very neat hairdo. Sometimes they even put on makeups. They are very, very refined and much, much softer in tone compared to the Western idea of what it means to be a man. This is the example of how gender could change from one culture to another. So keep in mind, gender is something that a society thinks or a society assigns to a person based on their sexual difference. Okay, so sexual difference is one thing, your sex is one thing, but how you are supposed to behave in that society based on your sex, that is different thing. And that is what is determined by your culture and your society. Okay, so gender is culturally constructed. Your role, how you should behave, that is learned and shared over time. That is different from sex. Now, the third concept, that is sexuality, is something that it could be even more confusing and complicated at the same time, because sexuality is often confused with gender. That is understandable, and I'll get to that later because of the local constructs about sex gender relations in Southeast Asia. But for the sake of my topic here, sexuality refers to how one prefers to have a romantic relationship with another person. It could be categorized into two broad categories. The first one is heterosexuality, which means someone's preference to have a romantic relationship with someone with a different sex than their own. For example, if you are male, you would like to have a romantic relationship with a female, then you are said to be heterosexual. Or if you're female, you would like to have a relationship with a male, then also you are heterosexual. Another category of sexuality is called homosexuality, which you might have already guessed refers to when someone prefers to have a romantic relationship with someone of their own sex. For example, male with relationship to male or female with relationship to female. These are called homosexuality. But between sex, gender, and sexuality, or in particular gender and sexuality, it is easy to distinguish between them. For me, I always think of it this way, that gender could be seen. That is how someone perform or express themselves to other. Looking around you, to people around you, you could tell if someone looks masculine or feminine by evaluating or by judging from their behavior, by their comportment, by how they, articulate their body. So gender is something that is visible, but sexuality is something that is invisible. You cannot see sexuality unless you ask. You cannot assume whether one is homosexual or heterosexual simply by looking at their gender. Okay, so let's make this clear, the difference between gender and sexuality. So once again, sexuality is something that you cannot see, but gender is something that you can see. You cannot just go around and point your finger at someone and say they are homosexual or they are heterosexual, because you cannot assume. You cannot know unless they tell you. But you can at least, I mean, this is something you should not do, but you can go outside and you could point your finger and say, oh, this person looks masculine. This person looks more feminine. This person look, well, looks like, yeah, looks, their gender is normal. This person has a gender that is a little bit off from the norms. You could make that kind of evaluation and judgments. You cannot do something like that in terms of sexuality. So keep that in mind. Now, moving quickly to the first reading today. That is the article called Reading Gender Trouble in Southeast Asia by Tamara Luz. For your reference, Tamara Luz is a professor in anthropology. She works at Cornell University, and her research interest is about gender and sexuality in Thailand. But her work has touched upon and has a lot of influence and impact on the general scholarship of Southeast Asia, especially on the topics of gender and sexuality. In this article, the center or the heart of her argument is Judith Butler's very, very famous book called Gender Trouble. And Judith Butler is the person you are looking at right now on the screen. Judith Butler is regarded as one of the most influential academic figures in the 20th centuries. And part of that is from a big part of that is from her work called Gender Trouble. The idea that is recycled and is being used again and again countless of times by other scholars, whether from literary criticism, which is the field of Judith Butler's expertise, but also other fields outside literary criticism, is this concept called performativity. What is gender performativity? What is its difference from performance? You may have the word called performative. Is performative and performativity the same thing? How is gender a performance? What isn't gender something that is taught and learned? Isn't it something that is culturally constructed? This raises a lot of questions. That is exactly what Butler wants from her book, Gender Trouble. So I have told you, right, that sex is something biologically determined and gender is something socially constructed, whereas sexuality is something that is inside people's mind. You cannot tell them, you cannot see sexuality unless you ask someone. So the key ideas of gender trouble, according to Judith Butler, she is trying to work her way in the reverse fashion. She's trying to critique, or she's trying to make a critical assessment of how gender is constructed. in particular, or to be specific, the idea of stable and fixed gender identity. And that is why Butler titles her book Gender Trouble. She wants to trouble, or she wants to shake or unsettle the established idea that gender is something that is fixed. It is something that cannot change, or it is a stable identity in her own words. How does she do that? She slowly but masterfully traces the idea of stable gender identity to the very core thinking. And that core thinking, she calls it a discourse. We'll talk about the discourse in a moment, but let's put it this way, that discourse is a larger level of the way of your thinking that shapes how you see your reality. So Butler, in her words, or I mean, I'm paraphrasing Butler's words. Butler argues that the notion or the concept that or in which the world is created with only two sexes, or the world works around the relationship between male and female, in other words, that is called heterosexuality or heteronormativity, is the key idea that drives the notion of stable gender identity. She said that gender identity, that's being a masculine and being feminine, it can be traced back to the concept of heteronormativity, or thinking about the world around you as constructed between men and women, male and female, male and female. So that leads us, or most of us, to the illusions that because the world is comprised of male and female, and they merge and then reproduce, give birth, and then so on and so forth. It works around this kind of relationship alone. So that leads to the idea that what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, is fixed. It cannot be changed. So that idea of fixed maleness and femaleness, of gender, in turns works to confirm the fixed identity of sex as well. So it's sort of like she's working backwards when we, compare to when I was introducing you to the concepts, right? Sex as something biological, gender is something culturally constructed. But now Butler is working her way backwards. She's trying to think about even the idea that sex is something that is stable itself is also influenced by the construction of stable gender identity. And that is why that is exactly what make Gender Troubles a very, very influential text. Because back in the days, let's step back a little bit. Think about the Gender Trouble and the context around which the book was published at that time. Gender Trouble was published in around 70s or 80s. And at that time, the world, the society, and the culture is very, very different from what we are, or what the time that we live in today. And for Butler to publish this book and say, hey, the idea about masculinity and femininity as something stable is all wrong. You are making a mistake. And here I am to prove it. You see, because the world is sort of made around the ideas of heterosexuality, and that creates a fixed gender identity that is men and women, or what it means to be men or what it means to be a woman. And that fixed gender identity itself works to confirm the stable sex of what it means to be male and female. But even though she traces her works, or she traces her analysis all the way to the biological factor of human, she does not disregard that sex is not there. Like she does not say that sex is something that is unreal. Okay, she pretty much acknowledges the biological factor of sex, but what she's trying to say is that we come to understand sex as stable identity, and we tie that stable identity to the construction of gender. So sex and gender works hand in hand to create a stable system or stable identity. And Butler is trying to prove that this stable identity is not natural. It is something that is constructed, just like the gender itself. So to the to Butler's key idea, that is the performativity. Okay, uh, Butler shows, as I told you, just like what I said in the previous slides, that Butler is aiming to shake or unsettle the stable of gender identity. How did she do that? She did that by proposing the idea that gender is constructed not by a concept, not by a preconceived or pre-described notions, but she said that gender is done by performance. Gender comes into being by the fact that you are enacting it again and again and again without realizing it. In other words, gender is something that is repetitive or something that is repeated all the time. And as you repeat those actions, those actions sort of like becomes your identity, becomes your gendered self. And that is the key idea of what she means by performativity. Tamara Luz said in her article that performativity is stylized repetition of acts. So in other words, gender are performative. I just told you, right? Performative in the sense that they come into being by you doing it. Gender does not come alive simply from the fact that you were told to do this, you were told to do that. Gender came into effect only by you enacting it or you doing it. But then again, the idea of gender as stable or something that is fixed is possible because the world around us is shaped by the idea that everything is created based on heterosexuality, or it is only like the relationship between men and women is normal. Based on this belief, we believe that leads to the belief, sort of like a concept of stable gender identity, and that gender identity is performed or is enacted again and again and again through a different levels of, what is it called, through a different levels of ideas and values, whether in your domestic life, whether in your social institution, and so on and so forth. So what is useful in this idea of gender performativity is that it reveals the norms that, to be a woman, you must be submissive, you must be feminine, you must be soft, you must be submissive, or to be a man, you must be strong, you must be adventurous, you must be tough. All this is not natural. It is, like I said, it is performed again and again through some kind of discourse, or through some time of a system of knowledge and belief. So by showing that gender is performative, is or genders come into being by performance, Butler shows that the pre-existing norm or the established norms at that time that believes that gender is stable is something that is not the case at all. Another interesting things that Butler provided to prove that gender is not stable is the case of drag performances. Have anyone here heard of drag performances or know what the drag performances are? Raise your hand if you have heard about drag performances. No? Does anyone know? Heard about drag performances? I do not see hands, so I guess no. Can you raise your hands? Okay. Professor class know what drag performances are. What about the rest of the class? Any thoughts? Yes, no, maybe so. I'm looking at the class camera right now. Anybody? Drag performances? Anybody who have been to Thailand? Ah, okay. Okay, so you have heard or you have seen drag performances. Yeah? Cabaret shows, anyone? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, I see some nods. Okay, good, good, good. Thank you. So, what I'm trying to say is that in drag performances, you will see the conflict between gender performance of a person. That is, that performance is done by male body performers. But the gender performance performed by that male body performers is that of feminine. So you see that gender is not a stable idea or a stable identity that is tied to sex alone. So in the case of drag performances, it very, very clearly shows that dissonance between gender and sex. And that with that example, Butler goes on to explain to us that you see, gender is something that is totally, totally constructed. Now, let me just touch upon a little bit about Michel Foucault here. I talked to you about discourse, right? And discourse is basically one of the most what to say? How can I describe the immensity or the significance of the idea of discourse? It's like a an, a mainstream or a key notion, or it's like a basic concept that all of us social scientists or humanities students ought to know when we write academic text, or is something that even shapes how you see the world today as we're speaking. So Michel Foucault said that power does not only exist by force. Power does not only work by you being forced to do something against your will, but power could also exist in a soft method or in a soft fashion, soft manner. And that is what he calls discourse. Discourse is something that shapes the way you think, or that shapes the way you see the reality, shapes the way you speak, shapes the way you act. But that very, very knowledge that shapes how you see the world is, whether you know it or not, it is constructed by power, or it leads you to think that something is okay, something is normal, and something is not. And by doing that, by thinking that something is normal and something is not normal based on that discourse, this is what Foucault called power in action. And this goes back to Butler's idea of gender performativity, because the world at that time when she publishes the book was governed by the idea of heterosexuality. You know, things were made for men and female, men and women. If someone is to have a homosexual relationship, that would be called outright taboo. That will be regarded as outright, immoral, outright, and that would cause like a panic. That would cause a social what is it called, social uh, dilemma, and then could bring some serious consequences. These are all of the things that sort of like shapes how we see the world today, and that not just how we see the world, how we talk that, but the idea above it, the concept above it that governs how we see the world. That, according to Foucault, is discourse, and he uses the idea of discourse to deconstruct how sexuality, heterosexual, homosexual, is becomes a category in itself. But anyway, that is not the part of that is not the main, the point of my lecture today. I just want to touch upon this so that you know how Butler traces her idea, or where she traces her influence in terms of thinking from. And of course, one of them is uh, Foucault's discourse. All right. So now, when after Butler sort of like goes through the concepts or the basics of gender performativity, after I'm sorry, after Tamara Luz shows us what Butler means by performativity, and then she sort of like lays out what performativity is, why is it important, and blah 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 blah. The next section of the reading, she goes on to tell us about how and why gender trouble is so influential in Southeast Asia, as well as how it could have its limits when applying to Southeast Asia, especially in the realm of performing arts. So while we transition to that topic in Tamara Lu's article, let's open up the floor and let's hear your thoughts and comments, questions on this paper first. Remember, I told you to come up with some questions or come up with some points, anything you want to throw into the class and start a discussion. Let's hear what you have to say about gender or Tamara Lu's article, Reading Gender Trouble. Yeah, feel free to unmute the mic and then speak to the class so we could start a discussion.
They have to discuss in Chinese first.
Okay, fine, take your time. Take your time to formulate your questions. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any comments? I'm sure you do. Let's hear what you have to say. Come on.
I'm going to call out people because this is not like American class. This is like Asian class.
I understand. That's
Jillian.
why I understand. Yeah, that's why I provided the instructions of how to read the articles.
Hello, doctor.
Hi, are you speaking now? Hi, are you speaking now? Hi.
I have a question.
Okay.
This article talk about the gender trouble in the East South area. East South. Yes. So I want to know what's the biggest challenge about the gender travel here in the East Southeast Asia.
Huh. Okay. What's your name?
Jackie.
Jackie. Okay. Thank you so much for the question, Jackie. And that's exactly what Tamara Luz is trying to raise in her article. So let's sort of redirect Jackie's question back to the class, since you have already opened with a very, very thoughtful questions. Class, what do you think are the challenges of gender trouble in terms of its application or applicability in Southeast Asia? Let's hear your thoughts now that Jackie has already opened up the discussion. Challenges.
Doctor, I know some challenges.
Okay.
For example, the economy, the policy, the religion, and the third gender, in Thailand and other people, not male and or not female. So I don't know the biggest challenge. Yeah, this is my question.
Yeah, okay, good question. Very good that you mentioned about third gender, and that is something Tamara Lu says could be troubling gender trouble itself. Exactly, that's exactly the case. But here again, I would like to redirect your questions back to the class because I want to hear your everyone's thought as well, of what you think about the challenges of gender trouble in Southeast Asia. So, class, anybody else would like to respond to Jackie's question? Yeah, somebody? Take your time, take your time. I see people talking, I see people chatting. So I'm assuming you are having conversation among yourself. So good. Talk about it, okay, and then let me know what you talked about. Okay, do we have
Hello, Dr. Nat.
yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, well.
Yes, loud and clear, yeah.
Wait. Okay. So maybe I think the main problem is the religion. Like, especially I think in different country. So like in Malaysia, oh sorry. Yeah. So like in Thailand, Thailand is a Buddhism country, right? And I think in Malaysia quite different because there are a lot of the Muslim people. So maybe I think the religion is the main problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So okay. Good.
So
So
wait.
yeah.
So I still have something I want to ask. So can we use some theory from the Western, like the queer theory or the gender equality theory, like to can totally solve this kind of issue, or we need combine or create some local theory, like combine and recreate like this.
Okay. What's your name?
My name is Cillian.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
My name is Cillian.
Cillian. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the input from both Jackie and Cillian. Nice. Thank you so much. See, that's exactly what I was looking for, for the discussion. And thank you so much for speaking. I really appreciate that. Back to Jackie's and Cillian's point that you raised. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges of gender trouble, or challenges of applying gender trouble in Southeast Asia. And one of the challenges has to do with what Cillian has just said, that is religion. But it is not the entire challenges of applying gender trouble. Yes, Buddhism, Islam, and even Christianity has some influence on the local concepts of gender, which which leads me to another point raised by Cillian, is that how can we, if at all, apply gender theory or even queer theory, which is something born from the West, into the society and culture that is built on totally different context, different system of knowledge, or even have a totally different way of seeing reality? My answer is that yes, definitely you can and you should engage with these theories, engage with these, concepts, even though it's from the West. But what's important is that, let me get you to this point, next slides I have here. The challenge of gender trouble, as raised by Tamara Luz, is that some of the key concepts or some of the foundations that Butler used to deconstruct the stable identity of gender is totally different in Southeast Asia. If you remember from the article, Tamara Luz says that by invoking just the term gender itself, that sort of like implies a different fields of power. In other words, what Tamara Luz means is that when Butler mentions gender, she thinks about this power relation or the power inequality between men and women. But in Southeast Asia, when we talk about differences, gender, of course, signifies difference between men and women, but there are other fields of power that comes into play, and that has to do with religion, as Jackie has mentioned, and even Cillian has mentioned. Yes, Tamara Luz goes on to discuss third gender, and third gender is something very, very iconic or very, very unique in the societies of Southeast Asia. Why? Because third gender does not just refer to someone who is deviant, and that is a word that we do not use in everyday language, all right? But just for the sake of our discussion here, you know, uh, third gender does not mean something negative. Third gender, back in the days, refers to just equal identity as a normative men and women. So in Southeast Asia, when we talk about gender, it's not just two genders of men and women. We also have this category called third gender. And these third gender categories has their role or have their roles, or they come into light, or they become very, very involved in this community, in the society, through ritual, through religious activities. So you see that the field of power is no longer limited to just gender itself, but it has to do with religions. And that religion sort of like gives status to third gender as being equal to men and women. So this is one thing that Tamara Luz remind us, that if you want to apply gender trouble, if you want to apply gender performativity, yes, definitely you can, and yes, you should, like I said, but you need to modify it first. How do you modify it? You need to know the local context or the local construction of sex, gender, and sexuality, especially in Southeast Asia. So Tamara Lu says that, okay, if you want to apply gender trouble, or if you want to apply gender performativity in Southeast Asia, yes, but you have to take into account the fact that in Southeast Asia, there is no such thing as gender binary, because in Southeast Asia, back in the days, we have this thing called gender pluralism because of third gender. This is one of the clearest reasons why gender troubles needs modification before applying to Southeast Asian context. Another point that Tamara Lu raises to us readers is that non-normative identities in Southeast Asia are gender-based, not sexuality-based. What does she mean? This is very, very interesting, and this is very, very specific to the cultures of Southeast Asia. So if you are familiar with third gender in Southeast Asia, I'm sure you do. For example, in Indonesia, we have waria. In Philippines, you have bakla. In Thailand, we have kathoy, or in Indonesia as well, for non-normative women, we have tomboys, or in some part of Indonesia, we also have these people called bisu. So these people, they are often called as non-normative identity or non-normative subjectivity, because their gender performance does not align with their assigned biological sex. But how Southeast Asian people understand their identity could mean something very different from the ideas that Butler uses in gender trouble. Let me give you an example. In Southeast Asia, or in Thailand, let me just put Thailand example. When we mention kathoy, kathoy is in fact a transgender people. And we understand that kathoy is non-normative. Kathoy is different from men, and kathoy aspires to become women. But we understand them as homosexual because of their non-normative gender performance. So in other words, in Thailand, we label people as homosexual based on their gender performance. So if you are biologically male, but your gender performance is feminine, you are assumed to be homosexual. But if you are biologically male and your gender performance is normatively male, you will not be under the suspicion of being homosexual. Even if you prefer having relationship with men, the society around you would not suspect your sexuality. So this is one of the examples to think about, before applying gender trouble or even queer theory, or the ideas about queer or queerness in Southeast Asia, is that how each society in Southeast Asia thinks about non-normative identities in the first place. You cannot just bring in gender theory, queer theory, and bam, just translate it wholesale into the local context, because the local context itself has their own way of understanding sex, gender, and sexuality. Another example is that in many parts of Southeast Asia, we've never had a history of sexuality. We never had this category called sexuality before until the introduction of mainstream religions such as Buddhism, Islam, and even Christianity. Before that, we understand like non-normative identities as just third gender, and we have a totally different concepts to explain their place in the society. So again, you know, uh, in this sense, gender does not follow from sex in the unilateral way. For example, like bisu. Bisu in Indonesia is someone who is biologically male. They do not discard or dismiss the fact that bisu themselves are biologically male. But again, their gender performance is not male. Their gender performance is something that is similar to women, or that is more feminine. And the society around them sees them as gender feminine or as feminine gender, even though they are biologically male. So in this sense, so it works in a similar way to drag, in the sense that sometimes sex does not have to determine gender, or gender does not necessarily leads back to sex. And this is something that you have to keep in mind. Again, I would reiterate my point is that pay attention to the context. You cannot just bring in or apply gender theory or queer theory without paying attention to the local context about how they understand sex, gender, or differences in general. Okay, and then the last example of gender trouble that I would like to draw on from Tamara Lu's article is the relationship of lesbian and tomboy. I'm sorry, I should have said tomboy and yeah, tomboys and lesbian. I mean, it is a lesbian relationship between tomboy, who is a butch female or butch lesbian, and dykes, who is femme lesbian. Or tomboys refers to, women with gender expression of a masculine men. For example, wearing short hair, having a more toned body, and they try to suppress their breast through their dressing. They would like to wear jeans, they would like to wear shirts, just all men clothes. And then they would have relationship with normative female or normative women, which is normative gender and also female biologically sex. In this work, Tamara Luz says that, yeah, true, their relationship is clearly homosexual because they are having a same-sex relationship, right? But the gender roles in this relationship is heterosexual in the sense that one of the partner assumes the role of a man, and the other one in the relationship assumes the role of a woman. But then again, they are not replacing, or they are not trying to think of themselves as a normative man or a normative woman. It is, yes, it is masculine in terms of gender, it is feminine in terms of gender, but the roles in the sexual relationship and also in the wider society of lesbian community is different from normative, masculine men or and normative feminine women. So in this sense, what Tamara Luz is trying to tell us is that nonconformist expression of gender and sexuality are not always outright rejections, as you see in many parts of popular cultures today, or in some cases like drag performances. You see, drag performances are like screaming about, different ways of thinking about gender, of thinking about sex and gender, concepts. But here, lesbian relationship of tomboy and dykes is something a little bit different. It is not, you know, clashing with the dominant ideas, but it is more of a non-confrontational expression of the non-normative gender and sexual identities. Professor Claire, you have your hand raised.
Yes. So actually, it's good that you talked about the Toms and E's, because I actually was going to raise this question. And it's on page, let me let the class know, it's on page 942. Actually, this is something new that I also learned. So you have Toms and D's, right? So is lesbian again a Western concept? Lesbian is a Western concept, right? Okay. So again, true, it's correct that when you say that I was thinking that they were actually in a heterosexual relationship, but I guess the Western concept would be they are homosexuals, right? But they are actually heterosexual because there is this power relationship between them. There is one that does the inserting, that likes to have power, and I also didn't realize that the Poms do not like to reveal their female body. It's kind of like embarrassing for them, for their Ds to see their female body. Is that something that you can talk about? Because it's kind of new to me that Toms actually feel embarrassed at their own organs. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. It is pretty much the same way as kathoy or transgender men, or or non-normative men are sort of like are not comfortable with their own, for example, Adam's apples, with their own muscular body, or with their broad shoulders, with their straight torso. It works pretty much the same way, because for tomboys, they imagine they're sort of like, to put it in a very, very crude explanation, they are in a wrong sex body. Let's put it that way, because they are thinking, they sort of like aspire their body towards masculinity. So whatever bodily features that hints towards femininity, it is something that they would like to suppress, and they would not like it to be seen, even in a private relationship, or even during intimacy. So that is why you see a lot of tomboys will have this discomfort revealing their private parts. I mean, not I mean, for example, the breast, right? Tomboys would like to have this their breast coverings, or some tomboys would like to get rid of their curved waist, because that refers back to the femininity, and it is something that they want to distance themselves from. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I didn't see. I can understand it in the men's perception, but it's kind of like I didn't see it that it's kind of mirroring the women's perception also. Actually, it's the same. It's the same thing actually.
Yeah. Pretty much. But yeah, it's come back again to your point, Professor Claire, is that lesbian, like, as a relationship, it is of course a Western concept that is thrown into this relationship of tomboys and Ds in Thailand. But it does not mean that this relationship is new. This relationship has been around for long time. It is only with this Western concept that we have a term specific for this kind of relationship. Before that, we just call this kind of relationship Tom D relationship, or we just say someone is Tom and someone is D, and then we assume we know it right away. That is a homosexual relationship. It's just that we did not have a term to define that kind of relationship specifically. Yeah.
Oh, so if they don't have question, I have one question.
Okay.
So is that this is like gender pluralism was very normal in Southeast Asia, and people didn't really see it as a problem, right? These Toms and Ds and these feminine bisus, right? So when did it become a problem?
Very, very easily answered is that when the introduction of mainstream religions happened in Southeast Asia, with the introduction of Buddhism, introduction of Christianity, with the introduction of Islam, these mainstream religions are constructed based on heteronormative basis or heterosexual construction. So the third gender, based on the explanation of these mainstream religions, becomes impure identity, or becomes a person that is deemed to be sort of like uncategorizable. So they are deemed as someone who is problematic in the society and someone who needs to be fixed or who needs to be, shoved to the side of the community. So that is basically the turning point of when third gender becomes, devalued as in terms of their social significance. And yes, it does not just happen with the introduction of mainstream religions alone. Other factors also came into play, such as colonization and coming of colonial powers and globalization, coming into contact with other external powers and things like that. But slowly and sure enough, the third gender becomes less and less valued in the society before, compared to the old days where Buddhism, even Islamicism, and even Christianity is not institutionalized in Southeast Asia. Okay, now that's it. Let's come to the second part of my lecture today. We know about sex, gender, sexuality. We know the concept or the gist of gender as something that is performative. We know about the idea of performativity related to genders. Now, let's bring all this idea to our specialty or to our issues that we have, whether that we are studying, that is our major, that is performing arts, that includes music. So what does gender have to do with performing arts? Well, gender in performing arts are very important, just like how gender is important in our everyday life, because gender in because performing arts are both reflective. It reflects the gender ideology of that culture. But at the same time, performing arts are also constructive, meaning that by engaging in performing arts, and this has a direct influence from performativity idea of Judith Butler. By engaging in a performing arts, you create your gender identity into being, or you create your identity self into being by engaging in performing arts or by participating in performing arts, no matter how temporary or transient that performing arts or that participation might be. And at the same time, performing arts also reveals the ideologies, not just about gender roles, oh, this is women, this is men, but performing arts itself reveals the relations of, in terms of gender, how gender relations is constructed in that culture. And oftentimes, actually most of the time, in almost every places, everywhere, gender relations in a culture is always asymmetrical. Someone will always have an upper hand or advantage, and someone else will always have a disadvantage. It depends which gender would have the upper hand and the other one would have the lower hand or disadvantage. And that, asymmetrical power relations can be revealed or can be examined through performing arts. And that includes music, which is why music is very, very important when it comes to examining gender relations, not just about gender or about women and men. This leads me or brings me to our second reading of the day. In fact, the second reading contains 2 chapters, and these 2 chapters comes from an edited book called A Feminist Ethnomusicology. And the book is written by an ethnomusicologist called Ellen Koskov. For those who aren't familiar, Ellen Koskov is considered one of the forefront pioneer and a leading scholar who writes about music, gender, and women. She is one of the first scholars who pushed the ideas or who pushed the scholarship of ethnomusicology or even music studies in general to start thinking about the role of women in music making. Think about it. Back in the days, it was so taken for granted that music is automatically male's domain, or it's like a thing of an activity for men, and women is like, this, and this is what she said. Women is like an afterthought in music performances. It was until her first book, women in cross-cultural music performances, when it was launched, people started thinking more and more about not just women's in music performance, but also about how the gender relations work to suppress women in some case or to value women in others. So let's discuss chapter 1 and chapter 2. Okay, so these are some of the key guiding questions that I have for you. But given the time that we have, can I have like a quick thoughts and a quick comments by any of you in the room, in the class, about what you have to say about Ellen Koskov chapters here? Let's hear it from you. Let's go. Are you guys still discussing? Just quick thoughts on your opinions or your comments about these 2 chapters. Like, what did you learn from this chapter? What is new that? Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. So the first chapter 1, where?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the early context is the male-centric musicology, right? Yeah, I think the first chapter is the early context is the man-centric musicology, like the Kotkov mentioned that. So so the next is the sorry.
Yeah.
So the
Take your
next
time.
is the rise of feminist awareness, and the next is the feminist theories and ethnomusicological application. This is the first chapter, I think. Oh, new question is not to. Okay.
And do you have
so,
any
this
thoughts or
question is
any
not a
comments?
conclude or something. Okay, so
Okay,
my
yeah.
question from this book is that I don't know. Okay, so my question is, okay, if the researcher themselves are queer or something like this, the queer, would they unconsciously exaggerate some question when they conducting the field work or something. So maybe there are some bias if the researcher is the queer or something. So how to avoid this kind of issue?
Very, very interesting question. And I think Professor Claire has an instant answer as well, but I'll take the mic and answer your question instead. Okay, Cillian. Bias is everywhere, whether you are male, female, you are non-normative, you are straight, you're queer. Whenever you do research, you are always bound to write your observation from your own bias, and there's no escaping from it. So one thing that anthropologists have been doing since the 80s is that you come clean. That you be transparent with who you are, with whatever cultural baggage that you have or that you bring into the field, whatever cultural experience or cultural upbringing that you have that shape the way how you see the field, that shape the way how the people in the field interact with you. That's the thing that you have to be transparent, that you have to explain into your own ethnography. And that would make the readers understand, oh, this is the perspective that you are coming from. It is okay to be queer and do research. It is okay to be straight and do research, just like me. I am a straight male scholar who is doing research on queer music. So my informants or my interlocutors, the people I work with or I play music with, are mostly queer. But then, someone might ask, like, who the hell are you? We are not queer. Like, why are you speaking for them? I would say, well, first of all, there's no such work for these people. And uh, me having contact with these people and interested in these people, yes, it is important to write about their work, about their social life, about their musical life, because it's never been said before. It's never been understood from their own life, even though I am representing their stories from a straight point of view, but I make sure that my representation is cross-checked with the people that I study. And I always I am upfront with my own positionality, with my own position, with my own cultural baggage that I have into the field. And, all these shape my view in the field. So again, to sum up my response is that, yeah, you can be queer and you can do research in queer, and don't worry about exaggerating. If you want to, if you see the world and how you think about it, write about it. Write how you feel about it. But it's important to ask yourself, why are you feeling it that way? What makes you respond to your experience like that? How much does your identity have to do with that response that you have? This is what's gonna make your work very, very strong and powerful and informed. That not just something that is arbitrary, not something that is evidence-less, opinion-based. We want opinions that is backed with evidence, that is backed with some theoretical scaffolding. That is what I would like you to do as a researcher. Doesn't matter what your identities are. Does that make sense, Cillian? Such a long-winded answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Because from the book, the early research. Yeah. So, some researcher may frame the woman as the other, right? So I'm just thinking about, so if the queer is the researcher, okay, or I will like the man or others, them are the other. So I ask you
Okay.
this.
Okay. Depends on your research. If you are queer and you would like to do your research in, let's say, a football club, or let's say in a bikers club, a Harley Davidson club, and you enter there and you are queer, of course you'll be instantly recognized as outsider. But if that's what you're really interested in, yes, do it. But if you are queer and you would like to work in, let's say, EDM, rave scene, or underground club culture in, let's say, Kuala Lumpur, yeah, you can jump right into the field and you will feel like home the moment you enter the field. So you see, your identity matters and it shapes how your field experience is. Back to your first, your response just now. Back in the days in Koskov book, right? Sometimes, well, back in the days, men did research about women and they write women off as someone who's not significant, as someone not important. We less focus on the men. Women are just something, like an extra. But sometimes now you begin to see we are moving from women to gender. Even some women at that day do research and they submit to this value that, oh yes, women have no place in this music and we should continue practicing that or following that belief without asking any question. So you see, now in this example, a researcher is someone who is oppressed or someone who is from a secondary community or someone who is not who is from underrepresented community, but they are buying into the dominant ideologies about gender. So it just because you are from a represented or just because you are from an underrepresented community does not guarantee that your research is going to make an impact or is going to make a change. It depends, again, comes back to how you ask your question or how you do research. Even men could write works that empower women or questions the ideologies or asymmetrical gender relations as well, right? It does not mean that works about women has to be written by women only. Some women can write works that are uncritical to the ongoing ideologies. And that is exactly what Koskov is trying to remind us in her work here. That she is reminding us, I think, I don't remember which first or second chapter, but she's trying to tell us to move from women to gender. What does she mean by that? She means that feminist ethnomusicology, or even if you call it feminism, it's no longer about women. It's no longer women only work. But feminism works to expose or to uncover the asymmetrical relationship based on gender. They work to reveal what kind of advantages or disadvantages musicians have to experience based on gender. Doesn't mean that that gender has to be necessarily women. Even men could end up being on the wrong side of the power relation as well. So again, feminist or feminism is not just about women. It's about gender relations. It's about thinking about the political aspect of gender relations. Because the premise of feminist or feminism in general is that gender relations everywhere is never equal. It is very rare that gender relations are equal. Even if in a relationship such as, a couple in domestic life, this relationship is never equal. There is always some imbalance between this gender relations. But how that imbalances might be, it differs from a culture to culture. So it's the job for a researcher to figure out what kind of relations it is. How does it work to the advantage of, say, men and or women, or how does it work to the disadvantage of, say, men or women in another culture? So that's the second point that I have here on this slide. But let me move back to the first point here. If you think back to the first chapter, you see that Koskov mentioned a lot about second wave feminism. So my question is how and why feminism of second wave feminism is so significant to Koskov. What distinguishes it from its precursor? With the time that we have, I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you the answer right away is that second wave feminism appeared or came into presence in around 1980s and extended all the way to the 90s until the early to mid 90s. Uh, Second wave feminism is distinct from first wave feminism in the sense that first wave feminism is only about white women. It's only a fight to get to bring power to the white women. Why is it a problem? Because the first wave feminism, they claim to fight for the entire women, like all the women. But at the end of the day, only white women came out on top to enjoy the privilege that they got after the fight. They got to vote, they got to work, and blah, 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 blah. But it seems that even after all this achievement, like I said, only white women were enjoying the new privileges that they have. Other women of colors still remained oppressed, still remained to be suffered. So that is why the second wave of feminism emerged, because they question whether feminism is for all women or is feminism just for white women only. So we begin to see that the idea or the demonstration of feminism begins to take on or to include more and more women of color. We begin to see that, hey, the problem faced by women cannot be just about sex. You have to take into consideration other aspects as well that intersect into the women's life, such as sex, race, and class. For example, Black women will have a different set of problem that is different from both white women and Black men. You see, Black women are facing both racism and sexism at the same time. How do you account for that? You cannot just account for their suffering based on white women. You cannot account for the suffering based on Black men. It is a very unique experience of suffering. So, second wave feminism is urging all of us to include this kind of experience. So, second wave feminism begins to think more about intersectional lives of women of color. And that has left a strong mark on Koskov's idea about research about women. So if you have read the book, you will see that Koskov began to think more about women's role in music performance in cross-cultural settings. She is trying to extend and expand her worldview. She no longer thinks about, oh, is women universally oppressed in music performance? Oh, is women universally inferior in music performances? She shifted her questions towards, oh, how is gender relation works in a different musical performances? How does musical performance create gender identity? How does musical performance reflect the gender identities? And beyond that, how do all these performances show us or illustrate or demonstrate the gender ideologies? You know, how a society gives values to different genders and how they are placed relative to one another. That's the shift, that's the transformation that happens to Koskov when she stops thinking just about women and move to the bigger question and bigger picture of gender. And that is something that I hope that you sort of keep in mind when you think about women and gender in terms of musical performances. Okay. Yeah. With the time that we have, let's see. Let's come back to this later. Let me just move to this one real quick. Okay. Cillian has already touched upon this about queerness. So this is one of the things that is mentioned by Koskop as well. One of the way that gender works in musical performance is that it allows a place where cross gender happens. And you can see this in many cultures. Let's say in Indonesia, we have lots of performing arts where cross genderism happens. Think about what's his name? Uh, Nini Towo. Is that how did I say his name correctly? You know, the dancers, the male dancers who is famous for doing female roles in Indonesian classical dances. And then there are things like this, similar cultures like this, all across Southeast Asia. But I would like to show you an example where, you know, musical performance is a site or is a place where cross gender can happen. Let me show you a case study here. This is a case study from my own work. Okay, so a little context. So this instruments right here, can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, hold on. Here. This instrument, I'm gonna zoom in later. This instrument is a zither. It's called jake. So it's a string instrument, but it is very unique because of its association with Katay in Thai culture. Or in other words, men who play this men who play these instruments are most of the time feminine men, or you know, sometimes even a transgender or trans women who play these instruments. So it becomes like iconic, very iconic of Katay community, to the sense that some of the, you know, straight men try to distance themselves from playing jake because they believe that jake has this, you know, curse to, you know, suck all the way their masculinity and make them kathoy, you know, which is like, yeah, it's a curse, not always true. Okay, but anyway, what I would like to show you is that you see how playing, just by playing jake, you sort of like assume the body's gestures, your movement of playing jake. It is graceful, it is sort of feminine in a sense, but at the same time it requires physical strength. So because of this, you know, this requirement of both physicality and grace, it makes this instrument perfect for feminine men who understands both gender roles. So let's take a look at this video real quick.
Nat, we cannot hear the sound.
I'm sorry.
We cannot hear the sound.
Oh yeah, okay. My bad. Share sound. I shared the sound already. Okay, hold on. Okay, sound. 1 second, huh? Mhm. Okay, let's try again.
I think
Let's
you
see.
have to go to the share part.
Share
the
sound,
share
right?
part, right?
Yeah, I did share the sound already. Okay, let me try
Maybe
again.
unshare and share.
Unshare and share. Okay.
Yeah.
And share screen. Share sound. How about now?
I heard some sound for a while, but now it's gone.
Oh yeah. Okay. You know what? I will copy and paste this link to the chat so
Uh-huh.
the class can have a look at their own convenience. Oh, they said chat isn't available. Only meetings of the team have access to the chat. Ah, that's weird. Let's see. Can I access the chat? No, I cannot access the chat. I will share the, well, never mind. The link,
Let me send me the link, and then you can't send me the link.
never mind. So the link is embedded in the slides. You can just click on this. Hold on. You can click on this title directly, and it will lead you straight, redirect you straight to the link. Okay, for the class. So what I'm trying to say is that you see this jacquet, by playing jacquet, it's sort of like construct your gender as both masculine and feminine at the same time. But it goes back to Tamara Lu's point about, this non-confrontational expression of non-normative gender performances. This is another example, another case in point here, because Thai classical music is a hyper-conservative musical and gender culture. It is very deeply tied to the state. It is very deeply tied to monarchy. And with that, it has a very, very strong conservative gender values. But again, it is a site where queer people or kathoy or, non-normative men musicians thrive. Even though they have to work, they have to refashion themselves, they have to find a way to negotiate under a fairly strict conventions. But still, leeways exist, some wiggle room exists, and they exploit it very well. So this is one of the, I think, a very, very exciting and interesting example that I would like to share with you. So you can go ahead and watch it at your own time. Okay, the links is on the slides here. You can click on the link and it will, like I said, redirect you straight to the clip. So just a caveat before we goes to the Q&A with the remaining time that we have. These concepts, whether gender performativity, whether feminist ethnomusicology, these are all very useful. And once again, I strongly encourage you to use it. I strongly encourage you to engage with it. I strongly encourage you to find ways to tie in these concepts to your own research. If you are doing research about gender, maybe you could think about how these ideas might help understand the gender ideologies, gender relationship, or the performance of gender. Because yes, music is a part of performing arts, right? Music is performance in itself. So it is perfect. There is no perfect avenue for thinking about gender performativity in performing arts than music. It is a perfect place, and it has not been done enough. I mean, yes, a lot has been done on performing arts, especially in Malaysia. I'm reminding of Dr. Anis, right? He's been one of the prolific writer about gender in performing arts, especially in Malaysia. But not a lot has been written about music in Southeast Asia, let alone in Malaysia. So I hope with all these points, with all these lectures, with all these discussions that we have had today, it will, give you some ideas to think about, give you some possibility to expand your research, to think about how gender intersects with musical performances and even performing arts in general. Okay, all right. I think we have like 5 minutes left. I know that's not a lot of time, but well, we have had quite a bit of discussions already. So with the time that we have, let's do some questions and comments again to the class. If class, any of you have something to share, something to ask, feel free to unmute.
Okay, I will leave it to the class to ask questions.
Yeah, I think we have time for maybe 2 questions.
Hi, Dr. Nat. Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay, thank you for your inspirational lecture. And I'm confused because I think this gender theory is very interesting. And I think if women, even when they performing the same masculine traits or behavior likes a man, likes men, uh, I think it's still very hard to obtain the equal social power, right? So is it just because of power is power sustained through the embodied sex gene something?
Okay.
That's my
Okay. So I mean, power is exerted and it's sort of like comes into being. I would say not exactly through genes or through natural cause. Yes, uh, biologically speaking, male has a stronger physicality than women, right? But power in this sense that we're talking about is the unequal access to resource or unequal ability to make decision. So that sense of power that I am talking about. And most of the time when we're talking about this, an ability to make decision in one's own will or ability to do something without being forced. Most of the time, men can do it pretty freely and women have to be very careful and women are often closely monitored, if not censored. So you talked about women performance, right? And assuming a masculine gender performance. What could we make out of this? For one thing, there are lots of works, with that looking at this, cross gender of women performance. Then and one of the arguments that scholars make is that, well, because the women are suppressed in their daily life or in their everyday life, in their social life, musical performance or even performing arts are one of the few avenue these women can exert their own agency or their own will to decide something, or even reverse the role of gender by enacting that. Even it's for a short period of time, even if it's temporary, but it is where you see, the gender ideology is being resisted or is being questioned. So we can look at this performance in this sense. Yes, at the end of the day, women will still end up being oppressed in that society because she's doing that maybe just to make fun for a short period of time, and after the music ends he will end up being the same, under the same ideology or under the same power relations again. But through this we are trying to find this different little details, where this power relations, this women suppression is being countered or being resisted, and musical performance can reveal this kind of process. I hope that answers your question.
thank you, Mr. Nat.
Do we have another?
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah.
Everyone has to ask one question. If not, they cannot attend Nantida's talk.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Everyone has to ask a question because they will not be able to attend Nantida's talk.
Ooh, okay. All right, questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Cillian has asked quite a bit of questions already. Let's leave some opportunity for other folks in the class. But yeah, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Cillian.
I'm Paul.
Yeah, speak.
Yeah. Actually, I have a similar research with your PhD dissertation. Yeah, I'm focusing on the Chinese male Guzheng performers, how they come into a female music landscape. So, so I want to ask you, I want to know how to define the video you shares. Yeah. What is the gender performance things factors you want to find and to explain what happening. What do they want to show their identities or something? Yeah. I just want to know the what things you can come from the video, the case, and how to define what are their gender performatives. And
Well,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, go ahead. Finish your question.
Yeah, already finished.
Okay. So, it all has to depend on your research. See you, right? Yeah, you are working on men's or male Guzheng, right? Are you working on Guzheng? Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah, you're working on men's Guzheng and like male Guzheng player in the female landscape. So you have to be able to first define what is the gender roles that is at work in that Guzheng tradition. How is gender sort of like what kind of gender role that is assigned to Guzheng? Is there a specific roles that in Guzheng performance that is reserved only for male? Is there any specific practices in Guzheng that is reserved to female? You know, is there a specific gesture in the performance or in the musical style that is defined as masculine? Is there any techniques that are defined as feminine? You can start from there, and by being able to pick out these gender roles, different gender values in Guzheng tradition, you can work your way onto the conceptual level about how these gender values in Guzheng is constructed, what kind of relationships that they have, what kind of ideologies that underlies this construction of gender in Guzheng tradition. Start from there, but it all depends on your context. You need to be able to find out or get that to answer those first, then only you can move forward and thinking about the gender ideology or gender relationship.
Thanks. We just talked about so many articles on the class, and I want to know all of them can be fit to analysis the male Guzheng performance.
Yeah, of course. But again, it depends on how you would like to apply them. For Tamara Luz, yes, of course, gender performativity is directly relevant to your research interest, but I'm not sure about third gender whether it's relevant unless you are working on queer musicians in Guzheng tradition. And yes, this is directly applicable to your research. And Koskov is another very, very, very good reference that you can consult or you can draw on when you talk about gender aspect in musical performance. Oh, one thing that Koskov mentions about this, cultural pattern related to gender in musical performances is that whenever women engage in musical activities, they're often seen as hypersexualized. Their sexuality is heightened. But yes, this is problematic because this is a view put to them. It is a male gaze. It is a male who are sort of like imposing this view to the women, but it seems to be a general pattern whenever women engage in musical performances. So I don't know if that is the case in Guzheng performance. What happens when male performers engage in guzheng compared to when female engages in guzheng performance? Do they have this kind of hypersexualized attitude attached to them as well? It's for you to find out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hello, doctor. Hi.
Hello.
My name is Li Chun. I want to ask you a little question. Can you help me?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little question for the if we need to go to the field work to interview some the gender the interviewees, but we collection the data come from the interviews, the interviewees, the views and and their behavior and their point and their views is very different from our the existing the gender theory. So I want to ask you how to understanding this different and how to deal with this different in our the research. For example, you just mentioned before the southeast of the Asian, our the gender behavior, our the gender theory is very different from the Western. So yeah, I want to ask you how to deal with a very important difficult different. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. So like I mentioned, first you need to, yes, if you find that there is a difference or there is something that is not compatible with the theory that you have learned, then you have to, for a second, leave that theory behind. Okay. Forget about theory for a second and then try to understand your interviewee's worldview. Why is it that they are thinking like that? What kind of system structure their views? Any cultural elements that are with it? And once you get a good sense of how their system of belief is structured, what kind of ideologies, what kinds of discourse is working behind this belief, then you can start comparing with the theories that you have. It is okay if what you find in the field does not match with the theory, because the theory that we draw on often comes from a different context. But then it is your work to explain, hey, this is where this theory does not work in my work, in my study. And then you have to answer why this does not work and why this theory needs to be modified first to understand what you find in the field. Or maybe even what you find in the field could add something new to the theory as well. So it could work both ways. But don't be afraid if what you find in the field does not match the theory that you have. It is, in fact, a very, very good start for an anthropological or even ethnomusicological work. When you see things that unmatch, that means you are doing the right thing. You are finding something interesting, because it is an evidence that theory is non-universal. It cannot be applied anywhere without modification. So keep asking.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, Dr. Knight. Can you hear me? Thanks
Yes,
for your
yes, yes.
sharing. But I have a last question for you. And my last question is, when we discuss the gender issue, we need to consider the local context. However, in the today digital age, the social media expose us to the a much wider range of the gender perception. And how can we evolution and take their influence into the account?
Can you ask your question again? I'm sorry. After the digital age and whatnot, and then the later part, I didn't quite catch that. Sorry.
Okay. However, in the today is a digital age, the social media expose us to a much wider range of the gender perceptions. So how can we evolution and take their influence into the content?
Okay. So think of it this way. All the gender ideas or even ideologies or even discourse that we are seeing today, yes, it is part of the globalized phenomenon. But don't forget that this phenomenon does not replace the existing gender concepts in your own culture. But these outside gender ideologies or discourse, it gets added to the existing local context. So again, it is your job to find out how are these two elements, one from local, one from the outside, mixed together. In what ways it, how much of the local context survived, how much of the global context is added to the current worldview of gender and sexuality. For example, in Thailand today, we understand gay, we understand lesbian, we understand queer even, we understand bisexual, but these do not replace our existing understanding of Kathoey. We still use Kathoey in our everyday language. So it is an example. This goes to show that the outside influence, yes, we take it, we accept them, we embrace them, but it does not replace the current local or the existing local ideas about gender and sexuality. So it is our job as a researcher to unpack and evaluate how the outside influence gets mixed with the local context.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but if they don't, then anyone has questions? Yeah. No. Because if you don't have questions, then I hope you can have questions. You cannot attend until that class. Okay? Anyone has questions? Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hello, doctor. Thank you so much. My name is Chu Yan, and my question is about how to balance academic patient and publication reality in gender research. On my own study on the female musicians in Chinese export paintings, I found that papers dealing with gender or the female identity often face difficulties in publication. The review process tends to take much longer. And another story is before I wrote this article, I asked any advice for a female professor, and she said, I think you shouldn't try a topic about gender. So I would like to ask, how can we maintain our academic ideals and the critical perspective while also adapting our writing strategy to make gender studies more publishable in academic journals?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer. How can I say? Yes, you would like to grow. You would like to, adhere to your interests, but at the same time, you cannot sacrifice everything. You have to survive as well, right? You cannot just be critical about everything and lose everything in the process. So, I mean, I feel you, Chuyan, but again, this goes to show what I just told you, right? It does not mean that if you are a woman, it does not mean that you are you are automatically a feminist. Like from your experience, it shows that even some women researchers or even academics still choose to censor themselves to speak about gender inequality. So I really, really appreciate that you are still willing to address this topic about gender. So one thing that you could do is that maybe find a publishing source or maybe a journal or maybe a resource that are open to critical thinking in the ways that you're doing. Maybe you need to, open up your options about where to publish, because of course you cannot go on force your idea onto some of the circle who are not aware or who are against your idea. You cannot force them because you are just one person, and but that circle, they have a lot more people, right? And they will outweigh you in most of the time. So maybe you need to find some other places to publish your work, but at the same time you use that your work, you use that resource or use that outlet or platform to start slowly working on your intellectual idea. And hopefully one day, people will read your work and people will start engaging or start making conversation with your work. You might not see the result in 10 years. It might take longer, it might take 20 years or so. Sometimes there are cases where some scholars have to die first before their works become famous. So I hope that's not the case for you or even for us all here, right? But again, what I'm trying to say is that this takes time for academic works to comes to fruition, to comes into the recognition of people. But do not let go of this critical stance. Critical stance is what makes academic circle grow. It makes academic endeavor stronger, and it makes academic work, it keeps it alive. So don't let go of that, but at the same time try to find other outlets who are more open to ideas like you. I'm sure there are lots and lots of journals. I'm not sure about in Chinese language. I'm not sure how much journals are there who are open to works about gender and ideologies and gender inequality. But in English language, if you're interested, there are tons and tons of journals waiting for submissions, waiting for works like you to submit. So think about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nat, for your session. I think this was a very amazing session. I learned so much from it. And I'm sure the rest of you. So I will pass this to you to close up the session because she's a moderator.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We'll take a photo. We'll take a photo on the screen first. Maybe we can take a photo on the screen cap. Everybody, open your camera.
Oh, screenshot. Okay. Hold on. Let me remove my headphone. I don't look good with headphones. Hold on a second.
Take photo for me, Jessie. No, this here because we can't combine that. Screenshot.
Is it done?
No, wait,
Good.
because we're waiting for everybody to open the camera.
Okay.
I don't know why we are seeing your body. I don't know what is this thing here. Okay, all right. Okay, I'll say 1, 2, 3, yeah? Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right.
Okay.
And
so can you close up the session? Yeah.
Yeah, also, if any one of you still have questions and would like to run it to by me, I think do you have my email? No? Yes? No? Maybe so? No? Okay. I will leave my email to Professor Claire, and maybe I might ask Professor Claire to share the email with the rest of the class in case you have questions that you want to bring it to me later. Okay, but thank you again, Professor Claire, for having me in this class. It's a very, very wonderful, and I enjoyed the questions from every one of you. Some of you have a very, very interesting questions. Some of the questions are very, very awesome, fantastic. And yeah, you have, I can see that many of you have a bright future ahead as an ethnomusicologist. So keep working, okay?
They have to take a photo again. Somehow
Again?
take a lot of problem today.
Okay, countdown. I'm ready.
Ready? Okay? Yeah. Who's taking the photo? Oh, okay. Okay, ready again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I need the moderator to thank you first.
Okay. What time is it now? 1:22? Sure, you all are hungry, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we need to close? Okay, let's close. Let's close.
Let's go. Yeah. So once again, thank you, Dr. Nattapol, for your inspiring talk and thoughtful insight during this discussion. We truly appreciate your depth of scholarship and the sincerity of your sharing. And today also marks the first academic meeting organized by the Nexus Circle Committee. I'm sincere thanks to Professor Claire Chen for her guidance and support, and to all Nexus Circle members for your dedication and effort. We hope to stay connection with Dr. Nattapol and look forward to for more opportunities for collaboration in the future. That concludes today's session. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Let's eat. I'm hungry. Bye.
Next year, Chiang Mai.
Oh yeah, Chiang Mai. Anybody else coming to Chiang Mai other than Professor Claire?
I hope they can get their stress approved.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see you there then.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.